we're here and we'd like to talk about John, who's running on June the 7th in the European election, and also our very good friend, Thomas Sheridan here, is coming along too, and we're going to have a good discussion.
Hello everybody, I'll just say a little bit about why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's not obvious, I don't think. I heard there's a kind of a slogan being coined, which is kind of an umbrella slogan for the resistance in these elections, and it's pretty good, I think. It says, tell the party's over. Yes. I really like it because it's exactly what this election needs to be about. The objective of our objective in this election should be that we try to ensure that not one political party candidate gets a vote. That's the idea. Obviously, there might a few votes stray in here and there, but we want to make sure that no Fianna Fáil, no Fine Gael, no Labour Party, no Sinn Féin, no people before profit, no Social Democrats, none of these people get any votes. Because there's no reason to vote for these people. There's every reason to vote against them. If you had a way of voting no to those, no, as well as voting for actual people who would be useful, I think that would be a good thing, and maybe we'll introduce that when we get into power. Yes. This is something that crept up on us, but it's one of those things like the what you call your man Hemingway's line from How Did It Happen? It happened gradually, then suddenly. All this, it just crept up on us, and then bang. And we realised that the political parties were our enemies. That they were no longer our representatives, that was way gone. They weren't even friendly, they were hostile. They saw us as their enemies. That's a shocking thing, but that kind of was creeping up on us for a long time because of having devolved power upwards and turning themselves into messenger boys, but then also becoming involved with lots of fake money, funny money, that had a further corruption effect, and eventually we ended up with political parties which were actually corporations in our country, which had seized the democratic franchise as their own property, and were then using it in a way that was antagonistic to the people, while claiming to be the essence of democracy. This is a trick they've pulled, which is really, really interesting, and you can't see it just looking at it. You need to kind of find words to describe it. And the way I've kind of formulated it is that what they've done is they've actually redefined democracy, which used to be the sovereignty of the people's sovereign right, and that these guys were their servants, these politicians were their servants. The sovereign people were sovereign. But what they did was that they redefined democracy as the institutions and the incumbent personnel within them. And if that's exactly what's happened in the last few years, because now they talk about anybody who criticizes or questions these institutions, or anybody within them, the guys who got in and closed the door behind them, pulled the ladder up and got in, they are now the sacrosanct, protected Democrats in our world, in our country. And anybody who questions that, anybody who criticizes it, which is itself used to be the essence of democratic discourse, criticism and satire and all those things, they're now not just the enemy. That's not enough. They're no longer the opponents. They're no longer adversaries. They're no longer, as I say, even the enemy. They're actually domestic terrorists. They're terrorists. You are a terrorist if you question these people. And this is an extraordinary sleight of hand that has actually worked. Because the media have taken the language of this on board, and they spout it out now as if they found new ways of formulating discussion of democracy in a way that actually changes the meaning of democracy without people really noticing that it's been changed. And by osmosis, the new definition will become the sole definition. And it will be obvious that somebody who has criticised the government should be in jail. that will become obvious. I'm afraid I have to tell you that, under the present conditions. This is why it's so urgent that we get these people out, because they are, by any technical definition, they're psychotic. But that's not even an adequate way of understanding it, because it's much more elaborate than that. They've used all kinds of devices to get themselves into this situation. Ireland was subject to a coup, secret coup, in 2011. I've gone into this before, but there's no doubt about it. The Spanish call it an autogolpe, self-coup. That happened here in 2011, without doubt. And there's several events that tell us that. The February election, the visits of the Queen of England and the President of the United States in the same week in May, and then the attack on the winning candidate in the presidential election of November, Sean Gallagher. That's a really important one, because without doubt Sean Gallagher would never have signed something like the apartheid legislation that was introduced here by one of the world's greatest opponents of apartheid, Michael D. Higgins, who put his signature on this abominable piece of legislation, and then mourned the death of Desmond Tutu a few months afterwards, with a completely straight face, and expects to be welcomed in this country when he should be driven out on the end of a pointy stick. So that's kind of why I'm running. I mean, I don't want to be a politician. I keep saying this, and the very idea of being called a politician makes me retch. It's even worse than being called a journalist. Honestly, it is. That's it. And so I've told my wife, when my obituaries, if there are obituaries when I die, that she's first of all, if there's any mention of journalist, she's to ring up and demand a correction and clarification. If there's any mention of politician, which there will be, because it'll be failed politician, or they'll find a formulation that makes me sound really bad. But that's worse. That's defamation. That's blood libel. So because it really, there's no words to describe the horrors that have happened to our country, the things that have been done to our people, the things that may happen in the future if we don't stop this now. And so we have to, each of us, in whatever way we can. I have a friend from home, he's a very nice guy. I grew up with him and we used to play music together when we were kids, and but he rings me up and says, Jesus, what are you doing? Would you not just relax a bit? You have 10 or 15 good years ahead of you. Would you just have a few old pints and play an old game of golf or something, for God's sake? I said, yeah, but I can't. I really can't. I've tried it. No, I've never tried to play golf. I gave up pints a long time ago. But I try to get away from this. I really do. I try to escape all the time. I'm a draft dodger by nature, but I have those knuckles in my back. Well, it's probably Pierce. It's not Collins, because if it was fucking Collins, it'd be a gun. and he'd be saying, "Get on, get on." And I feel that every day. And I don't see a way out for me other than going on. There's no way back. There's no escape route. There's no off ramp. There's the road. I've got to stay on that road until we get to some kind of destination. So I'm delighted to be here tonight anyway, and thank you to Thomas for coming down. And so I don't know what we're going to talk about. I don't know, but we're going to talk about something, I'm sure. I'd like to ask Thomas. It's very interesting, because you've always said, and I kind of about 51% agree with you, that politics has no future. Politics is not the answer. It can't be the answer. And that and yet we are in this situation obliged, it seems to me, to intervene to stop this happening. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, forgive me if I'm not prepared tonight, because I didn't think I'd be sitting on the table. I thought I was just going to listen to John speak, but I was roped into this. I was like putting grout on tiles an hour, a few hours ago now I'm here, so I'm not well briefed. So yes, John. I despise politics, you know that. I hate it, actually. But I understand it's like a necessary evil in order for a society to function after a society has a population of a certain size. In my heart, I'm an anarchist, but it's also the same thing as being in my heart, I'm a rock star. The reality doesn't match the actual the actual practical day-to-day thing, and I understand that. Now, I would not be involved in this except for one reason. I would call myself a free speech fundamentalist, an open dialogue jihadist practically. I think that free speech is the ultimate expression of Western civilization, and it took us thousands of years to get here. What began in the forums of Rome and in the symposiums of ancient Greece have brought us to the point where we had, in my lifetime, in your lifetime, and most of your lifetime, except for the younger children here, the notion that if we didn't have nothing, we still had the right to make an expression through satire, through anything. I always admired the English with their speaker's corner and that kind of thing. I thought it was a fantastic thing. And we Irish were the best at that because we're melted by nature, but we also have a very good way of using language. Now, by the way, a slogan is great. What's it again?
Tell the parties over.
That sounds like a Roxy music lyric. I could hear Brian Ferry singing.
I can now hear it, yeah, I can, yeah.
But yeah, so there's a film in the 80s I was watching. I haven't seen this since probably the 80s. It was called Pump Up the Volume, an actor called Christian Slater. And in the film he played a mobile pirate DJ, and he's driving around in his van so they can't put triangulation on the signal to ever shut him down. And he goes against a local congressman and starts talking about how corrupt the congressman was. And then the congressman makes a speech saying, well, maybe it's time for governments to re-examine free speech, that it should be allowed. And at the time, that was the most shocking thing you ever heard. And now we have Irish politicians standing up in formal government buildings and saying we should curtail free speech for the greater good. Now, when you hear the term the greater good, especially from a politician, that's backs to the wall time. That's very similar to a gangster saying, very nice shop, a shame something happened to it. It's a kind of a social protection racket to warn you that all curtails on freedom of speech are coming in and you better get left with the program now. Now, I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. And I find that very upsetting and very angry. And I'm very angry about it. And I think that's why I'm really here tonight, to support John, and why John, and people like you and McGurk, and lots of people around the country are running for the same reason. And lots of people you hear tonight and are hearing this message, is like telling an Irish person they can't have free speech. It's an attack on our culture, our spiritual level. It's a violation and a defilement of what it means to be Irish and what it means to be. This is a land of poets and orators and writers and songwriters and satirists. And it'd be like going to, America and telling the cowboys we're going to be outlawed. They're doing things like that as well. Yeah. But we're in a very dark place right now. There's a sense, I have no doubt, and I know you feel the same because we had this conversation, that this is a spiritual warfare at a very fundamentalist level. It's behind all the politics, and when I say spiritualism, we capital small s, attack on the soul, the psyche. The actual word for soul, the Greek word psyche, it's a psychic attack upon us. And I just can't believe that it's got this far so quickly. Now, we all know how they did it. In 2020, Western governments declared open warfare, hostile open warfare, on Western countries by declaring police states. That's what we were. We were political prisoners from 2020 to 2021. And that's all that happened. When people say, what was the story with 2020 to 2021? Western governments made political prisoners of the citizens. Now, with everything in life, when the shadow always casts the darker shadow always calls the brightest light. So John's here because of that, I'm here because of that, you're here because of that. So I would be very positive and not negative, because by nature I tend to be a kind of a neutral person, but I always try to be light-hearted about things. But the severity of, I was actually shocked, and to the point of me crying, when I saw that politician saying, we need to curtail free speech for the greater good. Because that to me was you know, in my life, and I think you too, and lots of us, even we don't consciously think about it, we've made a dogma of free speech, a literal sanctity, you know, it's sacrosanct. And here they are saying, you can't be free, speak your mind anymore. And that's bullshit. It's bullshit.
I haven't been to every country in the world, or even the majority of them, but I would kind of take a risk and say that I think Ireland used to be the freest country in the world because of its attitude to free speech. Like there was a sense of license in Irish life which was based on banter and slagging and all of those things that, you know, had license to go beyond what seemed to be to an outsider acceptable limits. But it was laced with all kinds of humor and irony and, you know,
and often kindness and genuine compassion.
And so that people would often, like, you know, if somebody was down the dumps, somebody would go at them, slagging them, you know, as a way of bringing them out of themselves, for example. And all of that was very subtle a lot of the time. And you see, we kind of didn't think about that as in any way connected to our freedom. We certainly didn't think of it in any way as connected to our democracy or our politics, above all things, you know. Although politics was kind of funny and a bit like that sometimes too. And like some politicians were pretty outrageous in their behaviour to each other, you know, they abused them with heap on each other and so on. And that was part of it. But, you know, when you look back now, and sadly we have to look back on it, because it's been taken away from us pretty much, you have to say that was really a really laboratory example of what John Stuart Mill was talking about over 100 years ago when he wrote his famous essay on liberty, where he talks about the centrality of free speech in democratic systems. And his whole idea was, you know, that far from actually closing down the eccentric voices and the awkward voices, that a democracy had a vested interest in defending them more strongly, more vehemently than all of the people who might be agreeable about something. He said that if only one person in society believes one thing and all the others believe the opposite, then that society has a far greater interest in hearing and listening to that one person than in listening to all the others. For two reasons. Number one, he says, if he is wrong, well, the society is vindicated in its opinion. It has tested against his contrary opinion. It has been tested, and it has been found to be a strong and reliable position. And if he is correct, then this one person, this one dissenter, will save that society from unbelievable disaster. And this is centrally, it's not like free speech doesn't exist for entertainment purposes. You know, it doesn't exist, you know, to kind of let people let off steam or because we're highly tolerant people. That's nothing to do with what free speech is. Free speech is essential. It's like breathing. It is the equivalent in a collective democratic culture. Free speech is the same as breathing to the individual. It's that vital. And if you don't do it, you die. And that's what's going to happen to our society if we let it. These people are, you know, they're beyond stupid. They're stupid. Let's not, you know, not in any way, you know, reduce their stupidity and the significance of it. But, you know, they're dangerously stupid and they're dangerously psychotic because they don't understand anything, or they don't want to understand anything because they only understand money and power, and that's all they're interested in doing. So, you know, and I can see that now in the way that people are, you know, being gagged and muted by themselves, self-muted. It's lifting a little bit, by the way. I think people are beginning to kick off the traces a little bit now in the last few months, and this year maybe. But you know, but for a long time there, people were paralyzed, afraid to speak to one another, you know. And those kind of episodes we used to have as Irish people. I mean, not everybody here would be Irish, and maybe this doesn't mean anything to you, but like, I remember these episodes as a child, being around with my father and going into a place, maybe in a post office or a sorting office or a petrol station or whatever it was, at early hours in the morning, there's like 3 or 4 people there, and somebody would say something and somebody would respond, and within like seconds everybody would be collapsing in laughter, and they would laugh for about an hour afterwards about this, the energy of it. I had an experience like that today, actually. I'll just tell you about this. I mean, this is kind of, I was in a petrol station in Monaghan, and I was just coming out, having paid for my coffee and petrol, and this elderly lady was coming in, and she looked at me, and I was kind of dressed, I don't know if it was my waistcoat or whatever, but she said, would you mind filling my petrol? And I kind of hesitated. Okay, yeah, I will. I went out, and I started, and I said, you know, I used to do this when I was a young guy. I used to do this as my job. I used to do this, and I was describing, and then I was telling her this story that I said, you know, for women like you, I used to have a particular device, because women like you would always come up to me, would always open down the window when I'd fill the petrol and say, could you check the oil in the water? Of course, that was a real pain in the neck. So for that, I used to have a large bucket of water beside the pump. And I would pick up the bucket of water, open up their bonnet, and I would pick up the bucket of water, and I'd go to them and say, do you know which is the oil and which is the water? Oh, just leave it, leave it. So she was howling with laughter at this. And these moments were like every day, every hour in our country. And that's going. This is the price of what's happening at a granular level. We're losing the capacity to connect and to attract other outsiders. That's why people came to Ireland. That's why people love the Irish, because they're like that. And these fuckers, pardon my French, who are nothing, they have no personality, they have no nationhood, they have no nothing. They are just envious, mediocre idiots who see other people with charisma and personality and are jealous and want to stop it. This is the most charismatic nation on planet Earth. And it's being destroyed. Everybody says so. It's not me. I'm not boasting. I don't, you know, I just see it. I know it. I'm not the most charismatic. We have to get rid of these creeps. We have to purge them from our nation. We have to ensure that their lights can never enter politics in this country again. And we have to ensure that this is never forgotten. That the lessons of the last 4 years in particular, but not just those years, for many years this has been trickling on, you know, as I say, gradually then suddenly. That we need to bring back a spirit of Ireland, the soul of Ireland, to revive it, to give it the breath, the kiss of life, and bring it back before it expires.
Before we got talking, I went down to the river, to the Shannon over there, and you know that's named after an ancient goddess, Shannon, and that's how our ancestors. It was beyond animism. They actually believed that this land was sacred. Every rock was sacred. Every tree was sacred. Every river, lake, grain of sand on the beach was sacred. And we've been removed from that. And that was something that was inherent in all Irish people. It didn't matter what your background was or what anything was. If you had a soul, you felt that. Like the sun going down over a lake, you felt something. The kind of people they have in power now, mediocrity is an element of that lack of soul. And mediocrity, when backed into a corner or confronted, can be unbelievably vicious. I read a book years ago called The Psychotic Left, and it was an examination of Bolshevik and other revolutions in Eastern Europe. And it showed how basically they would recruit up the biggest idiots they could get. Because when they gained a bit of power, they would think nothing of, say, wiping out a village or a whole population, if, you know, in Southern Russia or whatever, to stay in power. And these was weasels they were often. Now that we have this here now in politics, the person in this room that has the least charisma and the lowest level of what I call like social intelligence, true intelligence, would be an intellectual giant and a rock star compared to what we have in government at the moment. What we have, it's true, it's true, but it's worrying, you know, because if you do not have a sense of self, and if you do not have this sense of connectedness, like you just said, what all you have then is your ego, and your ego is important, but not when it's the only thing you have. And it's defined by what, or my position, I'm a cabinet minister, whatever. Now, I'm going to get a bit heavy right here now. They love their code words, right? So when they say far right, that's code word for working class. When they say popularism, have you noticed that they've been going on, oh, big problems of populism, oh, the upcoming election, what you know what populism is? What democracy used to be. People getting their vote and giving it and having meaning. This shows how this Orwellian thing of changing the words. Now, I have to say it took me a long time to come around, and this has to be edited out of the video, it's okay, to come around to this idea of the great replacement thing. It took me a very long time to come to that, because I didn't understand what would be in it ultimately for the politicians. But now I realise the reason why Roderick O'Gorman sent those emails out in all those different languages is like Tammany Hall in New York. Tammany Hall in New York, when the immigrants used to get off the boat, they say, welcome, you're now a member of the Democratic Party and you'll vote for us in the next election. Here's a bowl of soup. Well, what we're dealing with now is Tammany Hall on an industrial level. Now, the political system in this country knows it's a race, it's a real interesting race to the finish. They know that more and more people in this country are wising up to just how awful they are, right? Their only option is to get as many new people who know nothing about them, ply them with goodies, love bomb them with goodies, and get them to outvote us. Yeah. And that is so when you think of it in those terms, okay, when you first hear the thing, the great replacement thing, it throws it into the world of racism and ethnicism and stuff like that. But that's what's happening here. That's what those Roderick O'Gorman emails were about. They're trying, and that's why I saw a telephone pole or a lamppost in West Dublin that had posters of the people running in the local councils, and they were all recent arrived immigrants. There was even the transgender woman there, right? I have nothing against people coming to Ireland who want to be here and be part of the show and have skills to offer. In fact, I'd be given, come along. You want to be here and join the party? Let's do it. It'd be great, okay? But these people, here we go. When I saw those posters, all the mainstream parties, Labour, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Greens, and all these people that just arrived from the country, what I was looking at was Fianna Fáil's house Negro, the Green Party's indentured servant, the Labour Party's or Fine Gael's coolies. These are being people who are being exploited by them because of their race, because of their religion, in order to feed them. They're picked, and they're selecting them because of their races and their religion and their sexual orientation. Well, who the hell is the racist now?
Yeah. That's racism. That is what racism is. Yeah.
And this is the way we have to think. I wouldn't, like, say the first row here was people that I wanted to work for me, right? Okay? What they're doing is they're looking around, and if they found someone who's just come from another country, I'm going to pick him because he's cheap. I'm going to pick him because he doesn't speak the language and he'd be glad to work. That's exploitation. That's human trafficking. That is not an immigration policy. You have to understand the system isn't broken. The system is exactly the way they want it to be. And this, and as many anarchists have said, that the biggest lie or the biggest fallacy of democracy is to have you believe that if we throw out this bastard and bring in the next one, it'll solve things. No, The system behind it is the problem. The statism behind it is the problem. That's what needs to be destroyed. And that will only happen with a change of culture. And the only way that's going to happen is people who are not from the political system getting into it and then changing the culture. I'm absolutely convinced of that. You won't do it just by politics alone. This is a war of attrition. We're having to fight back the minds of the Irish people that were taken from them during the police state and prior to that. It started really with the EU in a lot of ways, because the EU had you looking at Brussels instead of Ireland, you know. I was saying the other day there, on top, when the march finished in Dublin last week, they went underneath this customs house, right? And at the top of the customs house is the tricolour, but above that is the statue of Britannia facing east towards London and increasingly towards Brussels. I want to see the day when that statue is taken down and replaced with the goddess Eru and pointed westward towards Ireland. And that happens in the mind. We get people thinking that way in the mind. It doesn't matter if the position, the political position is powerful or not. It's a platform to change consciousness. That's the way I see it.
Yes, that's right. We need to pay a lot of attention to what the media is doing and has been doing in our country for the last few years, and in the world generally. And the patterns are uniform right across the Western world, where they have essentially flipped their model. The media used to, when I was a journalist, from the time I started back in the 80s, I worked in various magazines, and we investigated things, we wrote about stuff, and we've covered stuff and politics and all that. And the ethic was always, first of all, to get the story before anybody else, obviously, but that the story would be interesting and that it would be true. That was kind of quintessential. And that was the whole point, was to make the world better. Behind every article was that unspoken impulse, that this article will announce something about some evil that has been perpetrated or some good that's been done. And that was, the newsrooms were therefore kind of vivified by this ethic of goodness, of seeking goodness, seeking to better the world. That stopped in March 2020. Because the model was flipped, because the media were running into big trouble, because they'd given away their product and for nothing, and they couldn't compete with the opposition that was basically plundering it, and they then got an offer they couldn't refuse from the governments, which is, tell you what, you've got a nice little operation going here, but that truth is kind of old-fashioned, so why don't you try telling some lies for a change? We look after you, we see you right. And that's basically what happened. And that has changed the world. We telling lies in the same way is free speech is kind of invisible and inaudible in a certain sense in our societies. The evil of a turned newspaper or a turned broadcaster is kind of invisible to us. We get annoyed by it, but we're not aware that it's actually changing the very fabric of reality. It's changing the whole way that we see the world. It's creating a pseudo-reality around us, like a stage set. And we're literally in a fictional world where we think, I'll give you an example. I was at an IFA meeting there the other week, which is a lot of farmers and their organisers, and there was two guys from the Farmers Journal doing the moderating, and all the candidates were lined up on a table at the top. 14 or 15 of us, and it was like being in this catechism class or something. We're being asked questions by the bishop, like for your confirmation. That was the idea, and you had to stick to the question, and you couldn't go beyond the question or behind the question, underneath the question, and they were just haranguing us, and most of them were happy with that because they had nothing to say really. But I wanted to go there to say to the farmers, you guys are at the front line now of the existential crisis facing the world, because you're the guys they're trying to get at and to in order to starve the rest of us. And so, you need to be alert, not just to your own interests, but to your role as the producers of the things that keep us alive, And I said, the people that we're dealing with, the politicians, with their shiny suits and shiny shoes, when they go into a supermarket, they all they see is cartons and jars and tins. And they don't see what's in those containers, which is food, which is all grown on farms. And that's the essence of this. If we don't eat, doesn't matter how civilized we think we are, if there's no food in the supermarket, we die. Simple as that. And that's possible now. That's a real possibility in a way it never was before. Because if you just screw around with the supply chains and you screw around with the production and you screw around with the weather, which they're doing, it's rained continuously since the 23rd of June last year in Ireland. I remember the last sunny day we had until the other day. For 9-10 months it rained. Nobody can grow anything. It's drowning. The seeds are drowning. And so it's lies. Everything is lies. It's an island of lies. But we're not the only. Every territory is the same. But we're concerned here with Ireland. I am anyway. And we haven't really thought about what that does to our heads and to our sense of reality because like I was talking last night about a guy who lives up the street from me and every day this man, an elderly man, and he's a very nice man and we get on really well, but he's very suspicious of me because I'm full of conspiracy theories and he kind of backs away from me, but he likes me, but he's suspicious and worried. And every morning he goes, this is a guy actually, I won't give away his name, but most of you will know who it is. But this guy was kidnapped by the IRA many years ago and held for several weeks and could have been killed. And he's a very brave man, a very, very nice man. But every day he goes off he lives 100 yards down from me, and then he goes off in the morning and I see him with his dog going up, and 10 minutes later he comes back and he's got the Irish Crimes under his arm, and he's going home looking forward to reading the Irish Crimes over his coffee, And he thinks he's going to find out what happened yesterday. And I feel like going out. No, I said, no, don't, throw it away, give me that. Here, here's another one, here, have this, here, the Irish Light, this is your paper, but no, he reads this and he thinks it's the same as it was in 1990 and 1999 and 2003, and it's not, it's lies. And the journalists are implacably telling lies. They're getting up every morning knowing full well they're telling lies. When they use the word far right, they know that's a lie. Yeah. They know it's a lie. You see, like, these guys, they don't really care about truth. This is the shocking thing about it. Like, I call it the set-aside media. The reason I do that is because set-aside was a program introduced by the EU back in the 90s, I think, whereby farmers could earn increased grants if they agreed to set their land aside, not use it for productive purposes. But it wasn't just enough for them to say that. They had to actually damage the land to the extent that it was unusable. And they did that by spraying it with poison. So it could turn yellow, and the satellites would be able to see that they were adhering by the program, and then they got their grants. Well, the same has happened to the media. They are now, instead of telling the truth, they're telling lies, and that's their equivalent. Their equivalent of spraying the ground, the grass, is that they use words like far right a number of times in every article. So, and I think there's an office somewhere in government buildings where they go through all the papers every day and count the number of times the Irish Times uses far right, and gives them a bonus for every time they use it. And white supremacist is another one, and conspiracy theorist, and anti-vaxxer, and all these things, and forward journalist is another good one, all those kind of things, activist, instead of calling you a journalist or a writer, they'll call you an activist, It's anything to disparage people. This is all about, you see, we need to understand how it works. This is groupthink. This is the creation, the construction of groupthink. Groupthink is very interesting. It's a very interesting study because to have a groupthink in this room, there probably is a groupthink in this room actually. We are actually in a groupthink. Nice one, but it is a groupthink, right? Now, if I wanted to really kind of work on you, I'd start saying to you, oh, look at those guys outside the window. They're trying to get us. They're dangerous.
Like a cult.
Yeah. Yeah, be careful. They're going to come in and they're going to cause trouble. They're going to, maybe we should go out and beat them up or something. Like that's a groupthink works off the outgroup. The in-group works off the outgroup. The outgroup galvanizes the in-group in its solidity of its certainties and its apprehensions and all those things. And that's what they're doing culturally now in our society. They're actually breeding up. They're cultivating this attitude, paranoia about the far right out there, when in fact there is nobody out there. Only ordinary people, women with prams and old fellas with walking sticks, and people who like me. I was a journalist in Ireland for 40 years, and nobody noticed my funny moustache. Nobody noticed that I had this little moustache here like that. Never noticed it until I stopped being a journalist, and then I became adult. Like this is how crazy this country has become. But you look at their faces; they don't know they're crazy, and they're deadly serious in their acting, and they're convincing a lot of people that this could be true, and they have done in the past. Now, there's an ambiguous moment here, insofar as we don't know exactly how the shifts are taken. I didn't understand the shift when it happened with the referendum. I didn't expect the referendum of March the 8th to go the way it did. I expected to win in one of them, maybe. I expected that, but I thought it would be marginal. I was astonished by it, and that told me something, that I was wrong in interpreting it in certain ways. That was more about fear. What was going on was people were afraid to, it was connectivity. They weren't talking. People were not talking. Yeah. It wasn't that they were actually believing everything they heard, but they thought everybody else was. That's how it works. And they thought, I better not say anything because he might bite the head off me. Or report me to the guards or something. And that's how, but then when people got into the polling booth, and I think this is going to happen again on the 7th of June, where you can't believe, that's the great news, now you cannot believe what's in the Irish Independent or the Irish Press, because this time it's a good thing that they're wrong. Because people will go in, and they go into that corner with their paper, and they just look. People have been looking around themselves, right, with fear. Who's watching, who's listening, Now they'll just take one last look behind them, And that's what these guys are not expecting. Yeah. That's what I believe. And I think that that slogan will actually, to some high degree, be vindicated. Tell the party's over. I think that's going to come.
But that dynamic that John just spoke about, when they go into the safe space of the polling booth, and then they said, okay, I'm me again. I'm me again. I don't have to subscribe to the mandates of the prevailing pathological cultural forces upon us. Very beautiful thing, very powerful thing, very spiritual thing, in fact. Now, that was the one moment in the last 5 years that really gave me hope. And the way you articulated the sort of like liberation when in the polling booth, it's that's it. Now that just shows you they haven't broke people. Now the problem is that when people are allowed to think for themselves, most people will come to the right decision. But they often need, I need it, you need it, others need it, clarity, and we don't often get clarity. You hear them screaming far right. Well, what does that really mean? There's no one. It doesn't exist. Most people I know that are called far right are actually, just like liberal commies. The Americans would have called them back in the 80s. It's a funny thing, they just shift the goalpost. Now, I feel a bit weird about this next part being a Jackie from Ballymun talking about farming issues. But I did do some research, and I looked on a lot of agricultural social media with farmers and people in rural areas talking about things like turf cutting and these kinds of very intense subjects right now. And the whole thing was that Eamon Ryan and the Green Party have caused all these problems, right? They're the ones who stopped us from cutting the turf. What people have to understand is that the Green Party have been brought into government as hitmen on the population by the Irish establishment. So when you think, if we get rid of the Greens, we won't have the problems that we have with the education and the Department of the Children and immigration and curve cutting and all the other things, and all the environmental tariffs and this kind of thing. No, you will. The Greens were brought in almost like kamikaze pilots to do this. So, and then they're voted out, but the policies remain, and the capos, the dons in this Irish political system that hired them to do this, and they'll do it with other parties, they'll do it with all the other parties they can. You've got the power, you've got your ministership, you've got your pension, you've got all the stuff. Now you left, everyone hates you because you put in policies, and then everyone, oh, the Greens have lost the next election, isn't that great? But all they do is they bring in the next set of hitmen from some other left-wing party, and they do the same. Again, we're back to the whole thing. It's not the name on the ballot sheet, except him, but it's the system behind it is the problem.
Yeah.
Now, when people, just even that coming into your consciousness changes everything. It changes everything because you now realise, okay, so that's the game. The biggest fear that they have, this is why I always said the greatest active revolution you could do in this country is stop calling politicians by their first names. Because when you start calling them by their second names, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, or formal deputy or minister, they don't like it one bit because there was always an element of protection for them there. Sure, you're never going to want to overthrow Billy. If you call him, Billy, Jesus, do us an L favour, this kind of thing. Give us an L bit of freedom, you know. But if you say, you know, Deputy Murphy, you will really overstep the mark on trying to curtail our free speech. You can just see the adrenaline just flowing up their spines and into the back of their skulls. I've done it myself, and it changes everything. You'd be amazed by the power of something like that. Because why? They're no longer setting the conventions or the demarcation lines of the conversation and the conventions that are taking place. You are. And they're out of their safety zone, and that's what happened in the box that day.
Yeah.
This is what I honestly, I don't know why Varadkar resigned. Was he pushed? Was he shoved? Was it a nervous breakdown? I don't know. There's all kinds of stories out there. Was it? Did he at least? Well, I hate to use the word the least. Did the secret of no one say it was time for him to go?
Yeah.
But the thing is, that was extremely significant because he was Jack the Lad in March 2020. Remember that? Yeah. He was a living god. He sat there with the smug-eyed face and the smirks all the time, telling us he may never fly again. That, when you think how far away March 2020 was, and when he left, that wasn't a long time. And in that period, you had the referendum that shocked the bisto out of them, and all, 15,000 people in Dublin the other weekend. It's like, the whole thing, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We're already on the first few hundred miles, the way I see it. And it's just that we haven't given ourselves enough credit for it. And you know what? And you know what's made it happen? Honesty. Because that's one thing that we have that they don't. We're allowed to say to ourselves, this is bullshit. And that's because we've all broken from their programming somehow. We've all broken away from it to some degree, some more than others. It's a very difficult thing. Like I was trying to explain to people on the group, you can sit there screaming about Eamon Ryan, but if you vote with the Greens, you're not going to put your concessions regarding turf cutting back. That's now in there forever. It's who hired him behind the scenes. And ultimately, we know that goes right back to the European Union. So this is why when people say the European Union is no use, on a basic level, tell that to Nigel Farage and UKIP. Look how they brilliantly use the European Parliament. Yes. And if people from Ireland can get in there and couple up with people from other countries that have a similar notion, you suddenly have a voting bloc that means something that's really, it's consciousness changing, because we don't have a government right now in this country. What we have is something very similar to the Politburos they had in the Soviet Union, where you had a kind of a bunch of plutocrats to sit around making decisions, but there's no actual real opposition. That's what we have. And ironically, there's more of that in the European Parliament than there is in All Ireland at this moment. And that gives it power. That's what actually gives it power.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was speaking last night in Monaghan, and I went through the post-2011 period in Irish politics very briefly as a sketch of what's happened on the basis of the Occult idea. In other words, on the basis of the purpose of the coup being to maintain the same ideology through time, regardless of political developments, regardless of democratic process, shall we say. So if you go back to like what happened in 2011, first of all, we had Enda Kenny getting an overall majority with the Labour Party, a pretty big majority. Now that might not have happened. There was a moment in 2011 very analogous to the one we hope we're having now, where the people were completely furious with the political establishment, having bankrupted the country and handed over our economic sovereignty to the Troika and all that. So in November 2010, people were furious, and everybody in the country was really almost on the point of starting a political movement themselves. But everybody was agreed that we needed one. And then miraculously a movement came into being. And it was called Democracy Now! And people remember this. I find most people don't remember this. It was led by 3 journalists: Benton O'Toole, David McWilliams, World Economic Forum, Mother Weffer, and Eamon Delphick, who was kind of a late arrival. Like, that's a story I might tell later, it's funny. But so what happened then? So everybody looked at these guys and said, well, I don't agree with a lot of stuff they say, but they're doing it, they're capable, they hate the politicians, they know what's wrong, they know what happened. Okay, I'll support them. That was my position. I mean, then I didn't want to go into politics any more then than I do now. But I said, okay, I don't agree with very much they say, but they're straight guys, as opposed to Tony Blair's face, pretty straight guys. But then the election was announced in January, a very short campaign, and Benton O'Toole writes an article in the Irish Times, in Irish Crime, Irish Times as it was then. It was still a good newspaper then. It wasn't a criminal news sheet. And he said, no, sorry, we can't do it. Just haven't enough time. Notice is too short. If we had another couple of weeks, so as I wrote an article, so I'm saying, no, sorry, the revolution has been cancelled because we couldn't find a babysitter. And then what happened next? The guys, and it's like the Bob Dylan line, like, hey, Mr. Congressman, please hear my call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. Well, these guys, the 3 of them, stood in the hallway and made sure that nobody else could get through until Enda came along, and then they stepped aside. And Enda walked through to glory and to the destruction of Ireland in all meaningful economic sense. And then the next, I thought the Queen of England came, and the President of the United States. Very interesting episode happened when the President of the United States was here. The 2 visits happened in the same week. Very interesting incident happened after he left. If you remember, some of you remember this, that there was this sudden crazy controversy about the fact that he had plagiarized Obama while he was standing beside him. That he had stolen some lines from Obama's acceptance speech of the presidency in 2008 in College Green while he was standing beside him. And I remember writing at the time, without actually going into it too deeply, that this is bullshit. This is bullshit. Well, I was never a man to defend Enda now, in fairness, but I thought, give it a break, But last year I started, when I was looking into this, I'd never looked up what the words actually were, and actually I don't remember seeing them, but the words are very interesting, because they're very telling. If you think of these words in 2 contexts: first black president of the United States in 2008 on his election, first white Mayo man to become Taoiseach, 2011 College Green, same phrase, and it was this: those who think that the dreams of our ancestors can never be fulfilled, they have their answer here today. Now, We know why Obama would have said that. Why was it, what did Kenny mean by it in Dublin in 2011? A black American president was the answer to the desires and the dreams of Pádraig Pearse? Really? I don't think so. It was an occult handing over of the mission of Irish destiny to the president, the Democratic Party president of the United States. That's what it was. And out of that moment unfolded everything that's happened in our country since.
Wow.
And then, if you remember, this was a slight kind of an epilogue on the year. There's other events too, but these are the key ones. There was an epilogue then in the presidential election in November that year, when there was numerous candidates, but one of them, Trump before Trump, manifested a man called Sean Gallagher, whom nobody really thought about him. He was on Dragon's Den, and he was, nice guy. And he was like, within a couple of weeks, he was like so far ahead of everybody else that it was like, 2 laps to the Grand National ahead. And he was like coasting home. And he was ambushed on TV by Martin McGuinness of Sinn Féin and Pat Kenny of RTE. And he was, within hours, literally, he was destroyed. And little Mighty D came up and he ran between everybody's legs under the hole, right? And that's how he ended up having a president who was prepared to sign apartheid into Irish law, rather than somebody who would have said, fuck off.
That's so deep what you said about Kenny and Obama as a kind of like a call and response. I never thought about that, but that's literally how they do work. Now you mentioned Higgins. Do you remember when the lockdown was announced, it came out that Varadkar had used a line from the Lord of the Rings? Remember that? Well, what's ironic about that, Bilbo Baggins up in the park signed the vaccine pass. It'd be a comedy if you would actually take it. You didn't see it for the absurdity that it would drive you nuts. Everything is wrong. Everything is just back to front, and it's only the absurdities that make you notice it, and things like that. He couldn't even write his own speech. He had to stay from Lord of the Rings while he was put.
But he was doing that all the time, Thomas. He was actually
putting us into a police station.
He was having bets with his mates that he couldn't get lines from certain movies into his speeches. This is like at the height of the greatest crisis in Irish freedom and independence. He was actually having bets with his mates. Give me a line, give me a movie, I'll pull it in. And he would. I can't remember the example. I wrote a long article about it. I found them all, and they were mind-boggling. That anybody could be so vacuous to actually go through to this kind of exercise, and so cynical about the role, the sacred role that he was occupying, Taoiseach, chieftain. That he didn't even seem to take it seriously as something that had been inherited. I mean, that's why I keep saying, between himself and Harris. And I mean, Harris, I have a huge difficulty about Harris, and it's this. How do I express myself in the context of trying to get across that this is worse than Varadkar? Because how could anything be worse than Varadkar? And yet Harris manages it. How does he do it? I don't know. I don't. That doesn't. I don't want that to be interpreted. Please, can we have Varadkar back? Please, no. But the language is inadequate for this purpose.
What Harris reminds me of. Remember that TV show when we were kids, Thunderbirds? He's like a Thunderbirds puppet.
Yes. Yeah.
He's like if Jerry and Shirley Anderson had have made Dáil Éireann, they wouldn't have had to make a Harris puppet, because all they have to do is put strings on him. Everything about him comes across that way. There's an unreality about him.
Totally.
Yeah.
He's like one of those guys, that politics. That's what happened in politics in the time, I think, of supranationalism, the EU particularly. That all the kind of intelligent, sharp people who would have gone into politics before, the Hawleys or the Fitzgeralds, depending on your alignment, or whoever, you know, and you know, there were a lot of those guys, you know, John Kelly, Peter Barry, they were serious guys, right? And you know, Noel Brown, Sean McBride, these are guys you could send out, you know, and they wouldn't make an ass of themselves. But you know, then we ended up with, you know, something happened in politics where it started to attract very, very kind of inadequate people. You know, people who were kind of on the spectrum somehow or whatever, you know. But they found that they were like given things to do in political parties, even if it was only making the tea or, you know, putting stamps on envelopes. And they stuck around. And that Harris is one of those. And he just stuck around and stuck around and stuck around until everybody else got bored and went home. And he ended up as Taoiseach. A guy who got elected on the 15th count. Like Taoiseach used to get three quotas in elections. Now they don't even get one. Like. And this is another example of the degeneracy of our political culture, which doesn't go remarked on, because the political commentariat still talk about it in that old horse racing kind of idiom that they use about politics. You know, it's the runners and the riders, you know, it's that kind of approach. There's no heart in it. There's no sense this is our country we're talking about. You know, this is our history. This is the blood and sweat of our ancestors. This is this blood-soaked land of Ireland that we're talking about. Like, there's none of that, and so all of these things go unnoticed in the culture. We just take what's there. It's like, you know, a buffet or whatever. You just go and say, okay, I'll have that. It was fish today. Okay, I'll have that. Some spaghetti or some some broccoli or whatever. And that's the way we kind of consume our cultural content about politics, when in fact it's the most precious thing, you know, that we get it right. We really have to get it right. This is deadly serious. I mean, you know, you can make jokes and you can, you know, what I mean, if I go into politically, I mean, the European Parliament is a bit of a joke, not in fairness, but if I were to go into the Dáil, I would not regard it as a joke at all. It is a deeply serious thing to represent your people in your parliament. You know, the European Union is a totalitarian disgrace. You know, my only objective would be to tear it down and, shame it into non-existence. I mean, not that I necessarily, you know, like, there's lots of stuff we could do with the EU. We could just simply go back to being a common market. We could get together with other European countries and say, no, we don't want Ursula anymore. We don't want any of this stuff. We just want.
Or an alternative unit with like Britain and Hungary and you know.
Yeah. There's no reason.
There's loads of things on the table.
Yeah. There's no reason like that there's not, because that's one of the things I noticed actually about when people were being interviewed on RIP there recently. It was kind of being presented as a black and white. Oh, so you're against somebody, Herman Kelly was. You want us to leave the European Union? You're idiot. You know, that's the kind of vibe. And I would say, well, what I want doesn't necessarily matter. What I argue for might matter, and it might have some role to play, but I won't be making the decision. But there are other options that I would propose in the first instance. Let's pull back from this totalitarian nightmare we're generating. Let's forget about the federal Europe. Let's forget about being the United States of Europe. Let's go back to being a trading bloc. Let's get rid of the bureaucracy. Let's get rid of the regulations. Let's get rid of the laws. Let's get these guys out of our lives and bring back our currencies in Europe, bring back our parliaments, give full sovereignty back to our parliaments, and let the people then decide what kind of countries they're going to have and what kind of economies they're going to have, not be dictated to by people who haven't picked up a single vote in their entire lives.
I'll just say one last thing, and I meant to say this at the start, but it's a serious one I'll finish on. I have no doubt that both France, Germany and Britain are heading towards being the next Yugoslavia. They're definitely going to balkanise, definitely going to blow up. You can feel it in the air. In Ireland, we have a chance right now to shut the gates before we become the next Yugoslavia. Right now, we can do it. we have a chance and an opportunity to do this that Britain doesn't have. I think the horse is bolted there, I think the horse is bolted in France, I think the horse is bolted in Germany. But we still have a chance to put the padlock on the gates. And we're very fortunate that we're having this consciousness wake up by the population at this moment. So people watching this video online, I'm not stealing John's thunder. By the way, you'd make a great Doctor Who, it just dawned on me. But, wouldn't he? But, to avoid a future Yugoslavia on this island, people who are watching this video, not necessarily in John's constituency, but where other people of life, of patriots, you know, what you want to call them, of us, give them your vote all down the line, even if you don't like them. Because we have a chance now to send a message out and enough momentum growing to put the bolt on the gate and prevent a future Yugoslavia down the road. And we might even be a model country at stopping at this point and getting the diversity thing right. But the thing that we have to do is to destroy the system right now. That's all they're interested in. That's why they're trying, that's why they're taking immigrants and they're using them and putting them on posters. This is what, when Tito died in Yugoslavia, something very strange happened. They would put, the globalist European Union didn't like a big union in the East. So they did things like they would put Bosnians in charge of Croatia, Montenegrins in charge of Serbia, Slovenians in charge of Kosovo. The resentment, it was deliberately done to build up the resentments because they wanted a Yugoslavia civil war. Because divide and conquer keeps the monster still in power. And they got it successfully, and the European Union got 7 new states out of it or something, and they destroyed a functional nation in Eastern Europe. Yugoslavia was a highly functional nation. They had a higher standard of living in the 80s than Ireland did. Even though they were communists, they weren't like a kind of a Bolshevik totalitarian communism. But that was a country that was obliterated for that reason. We have a chance to put the bolt on the door. And it's probably, I really hate saying this, but it's probably the last chance. Because even if we just send the message, you know, if you say, well, I don't agree with what John Waters and people like him, because I'm not bigoted, you know, this kind of thing. Don't think of yourself, right? Think of the possibility of not only your children being ethnically cleansed 30 years down the road, but maybe the Polish family down the street, the African family around the corner. Show absolute humanity and close the door now. That would be my message.
One of the things we've learned in the last 4 years is that progress doesn't exist. Progress is a myth. Progress is an illusion that is generated by a certain notion of time. That time is linear, and that it's not a circular thing, as it used to be thought of. And that that idea that every day in every way things are getting better and better. That's drummed into all our heads. That's the way it is, and that by definition then what happens is better. And then nobody's even allowed to say it objectively it's worse. And I've talked about this, we talked to, myself and Thomas were talking about the 80s before we came on, and about the music and the culture and the plays and the books that were being written and all that in Ireland. It was a hugely vibrant time and a really fun time, and the weather was better too. I remember it, every day was in the summer was sunny then, and there was festivals in Liston-Varna and Punchestown and all these places, and we lived in the back of high-ace vans from May to September, and so on. And when I look now at, if I put like that, my 2 hands down there, that's 2024, that's 1984, and I kind of look at them. And then I meditate on the meaning of those years, the memories of that 1984, the year, which was in a sense demonized by Orwell's book. Not in a bad way, but very beautifully done. but he had to pick some year, and he just reversed 1948, which is the year he could finish the book. So I had a friend of mine actually back in the 70s started a discotheque, a mobile disco, you know, and he called it Disco 80, and we thought that was like the height of modernity then, you know. And
the bowling alley in Stillorgan.
yeah. So Disco 80, yeah, he's cool. He's in the future. So I look at them now and I meditate and I remember everything, the freedoms we had, the writing, the books, the journalism, the spirit, the music, the rock and roll. And then I look at 2024 and I think about progress. I said, like, something's wrong here. What is it? Oh. That's the way it should be. This 1984 is where we want to go. That's our future, if we can find it. That's what's happened to us. The ideology of progress has destroyed our capacity to be ourselves, to create our own futures, to create our own country. This is totalitarianism in its essence. Václav Havel, that's how he defined it, the nihilization of the past and the seizing of the future, so that the future is created for you as a pre-prepared entity. Like it's like you're buying a fully furnished flat and you just move in. Well, that's what we're being required. It's not a very nice flat and the furniture is terrible. And we just say, suck it up, take it, here's a straw, here, suck it up. And that's our politics, that's what our politics has delivered us to. So we deserve better, our children deserve better. We have to stop this now. We have to put this in reverse. We have to say to these guys, very likely person to be quoting, but I quote him, Oliver Cromwell, in the name of God, go. Thank you for your support for me and for all the other candidates, and we will continue for the next 3 weeks and try to deliver the best outcome for the Irish people that we can possibly achieve. That's the at the end. It's not even about getting me elected or any particular individual elected. It's about the overall result, and we have a system, luckily, the R system, which actually, if used properly, will actually serve that in the sense of maximising our vote. People often, my father used to advise me when I was a child, he said about how to vote, that if there were 20 candidates, you had to vote up to 20, go down in your precise sequence of preference. But I would say, I would modify that a bit and say this time, in honour of our slogan, which hasn't been launched yet, but we would stop before the parties. So we would count all the independent candidates, number them in the order of your preference, and stop then if it's whatever number it is out of the 20. I think there are 28 candidates in our constituency. I think there's possibly around 15 independents, 16, 17 maybe. And number each of those in preference, and that is the way of ensuring that your vote is never wasted. That if a candidate is elected or eliminated, that the vote will not die on the vine and will go on to somebody else, and that's very important. Don't think in just the idea of voting number one. Of course, if people vote for me number one, I won't be complaining. But that's what's called a plumper, and it's actually, in a certain sense, it's an inadequate vote. Really, it's a waste of a vote to some, potentially, because it may actually just not be of any use to anybody, because the person you vote for may not need it. Either because they're elected straight off or because they're eliminated straight off, and then your vote's gone. So if you have a number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, your vote can live on throughout the totality of the count, and that's very important. So thank you all for coming in, and We hope that we will meet again after June the 7th and that we will have smiles on our faces.
Yeah.